Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Okay, first off, I just want to let you know, there it is. It actually is running. I can plug it in. In fact, I shut the shop off from the house, and then I ran the whole shop for 24 hours off of the inverter setup, and then I turned around, put myself back onto the power, and then used it to recharge the battery back up to 100%, and everything went off. So my first test during it really went well. It took about 3 hours to recharge it at 30 amps. So I figured there was somewhere around 75 amps is what I used out of the 300 amps. But that's my problem, is that I really like to keep a closer track of that, especially in real time. So I have splurged, and I went out and got my first upgrade. And I bought the 500 amp smart shunt from Victron. I decided that would probably do what I needed to do. And having the Bluetooth app so I can watch it from my phone while it's working from out here, and yet it's keeping the house powered, I can monitor this thing even from the house. So my first initial test, I'm very happy. So I'm going to reset it up and redo it. But as you can see, it all fits under this wagon here pretty good. You can see that's the handle down there to steer it and to pull it. And I put the batteries near the back wheel, but everything is inside of the wheelbase, the main weight, so that it will carry it. And it pulls around very easily. I have no problem on level ground, especially. Over bumps, everything. Those pneumatic tires was a good choice, as opposed to hard rubber tires for rolling purposes. So at this point, feels a little bigger than I'd hoped it would, but it's a 2x4 footprint, period, and there's no getting around that. And it maneuvers in that respect too. It doesn't do too badly to do it, but you have to be aware. I think I would like to put a push system on the cart itself, maybe put on each corner an upright, and tie them all four together so that I can have something to be able to grab or pull or push from any direction, so that while I'm steering it with the wheels, I can push by pushing on the cart itself. It would make it a lot easier to maneuver. So I think I'm going to put some kind of push system on it in the near future. But you know what? I am so happy to have it up and running. And it's very simple to get it going. I haven't really programmed much of anything in it. I checked a couple of settings, and they're acceptable for now. But I do want to fine-tune it. So as I go along, that's what I'll do as I experiment with it. Because I'll be turning the power off in the shop and running off this thing for longer and longer periods of time. In order to hook it up, it was really simple. I hooked the batteries up in parallel, one to the next, and then that far one has the negative main wire hooked to it that goes to the inverter, and the positive is on this one. So they're as far apart as they can be. So theoretically, with 3 batteries, they should stay pretty balanced. I did hook up the communication between the all-in-one and the batteries with the cables that they supply, but I haven't done much with it. Eventually, as I learn how to use it, I'll go a little better. Oh, a couple quick tips. You have to take the screws out on the bottom to pull that bottom panel to get to where you do your wiring and such. And I know I'm definitely going to have to get back in there off and on, especially when I get ready to hook up something with solar. So far, all I do is I put this thing, plug it in to run the power out of it, and when I'm ready, I can then just plug it back into it when I'm back on grid and bring it back up the power and put the power back in here. So there's 2 plug-ins, one for putting power into the unit and one for taking power out and supplying it to the house. So between that and these cables, that's the only hookups there are. And for the plug-ins, all I did is I bought a 25-foot alternator type, a generator type cable, a 30 amp, 240, and that's the same plugins that I put on the wall so I could plug it in to my system I cut it in half and hooked up one to the input, one to the output, because you need one male and one female, so it all worked out good. And I just keep them wrapped up on here for now. I'm going to try to get a wrapping thing, one on each side for each of the two cords eventually. But the main thing is I'm going to be doing a lot of improvements. So I'll give you a close look at it when I get a little further along. Right now, it's still a little tight space, but with it sitting right here, I push it back closer to the back door so that I have free walkway all the way around, and it'll still reach to plug in from where it's going to be sitting. So anytime I want to hook it up and charge it, or I want to hook it up and power things from this instead, I'll have that capability without having to move the unit. So anyway, and if the power goes off, I can plug that in real quick in 3 minutes, turn the power breakers off in the house and on like they need to be, and I'm up and running in less than 5 minutes running off of the battery power. And again, I think 12 hours. I also have a 50-foot cable, so I can run from the generator an extension cable that will reach to this thing sitting in here, and that will allow me to charge the batteries up while I'm even still using it. So I won't have to, shut it off, turn it over to the generator to let it supply the power and then charge. I can use this to use the generator to charge that up directly. So anyway, the advantages of them all-in-ones is that you can be running it and using your generator to charge it back up without interrupting your power. Other than that, I'm ready for the next power outage. The only other thing I want to do real quick is add a alarm. You can buy them. They're sensors that sense when you have power on a wire. You just wrap it around the wire, then it just sits there, and then when the power comes on, the alarm goes off. So you know the power is back on, because otherwise you wouldn't know. That way, because the breaker's off. Anyway, I'll leave a link to one of those when I get that picked up and I get it hooked up to the house, because I do want to do that sooner or later so I know when the power is restored. But that's the only other thing I got to do to have a functional off-grid unit for emergency use when the power goes down. I wanted to take a minute and talk about this unit, because this is a DIY whole house backup. Now you can buy those units also. Delta Pro, Blue Eddy, there's a ton of them out there. And you could buy those and not have to do any kind of electrical work at all to do what I did here. But remember, you got to buy 2 Delta Pros or 2 Blue Eddies, or whatever you're getting system. You have to buy 2 and then buy the hub to be able to plug them in and get 240 out of it to supply a house, like mine here in America. So in order for this thing to work, I went with a 240 volt inverter so that I can run everything in the house just by plugging it in. So I plugged this in, and the ease of it is that instead of plugging my generator into the house and firing up the generator and having to listen to that, I now can plug this into the house, and I can plug the generator into it, and then anytime run the whole house quietly off the batteries. If the batteries get low, I start the generator up for a couple hours, and I'm up and running back and turn it back off. Most of those units that you buy that are pre-made, and that way you don't have to actually build yours, the only real drawback to most of those, if you check, you cannot charge them while you're using the unit. So if your power goes down, you got to hook up the generator, run the house off the generator, and then plug those in to run it. It gets another step into the whole thing. Plus, the other disadvantage to those systems, those 2 batteries are independent of each other. They're each 120 volt outputs. The problem is that one gets drained down faster than the other. You're going to be out of business when that first one gets drained, even though you still have plenty of power in the second one. If you DIY your own, you're really going to, I'm drawing everything off of one set of batteries. So both sides of your power will draw this one battery down instead of having two separate battery systems to run the whole thing. It's just little things like that. That's why I decided, rather than buying the whole backup system from Delta or Bluetti or somebody, I went with this. Is that building it is I get more of what I'm really looking for in doing the whole thing. Plus, honestly, the Pro Max, last time I looked, you're still talking about around $12,000 approximately to be able to have two extra batteries and the two Delta Pros. And by the time you set it all up, you end up with 12 kilowatt hours of power and 3,600 watts of 7,200 watts of output between the two. On here, it's only 6,000, but that difference is not a deal breaker for what I'm doing to run the house. But I also have 15 kilowatt hours instead of just 12. And for half the money, because I'm going to have well less than $6,000 wrapped up in this whole thing. Right now, I'm probably around $5,500. And I've got some other things I want to do to it so that I can do some other things. I also want to get another cord. Anyway, these are future plans. But right now, just for the bare bones unit so I can back up my house, I have half the money that I would have to do it if I bought the units instead of building my own. So a little bit of research and learning, and I do have a basic knowledge of the AC electrical. But you can actually build one of these. Will Prowl shows you how to build these things in a 120 volt unit. And building it a 240 unit is really not any different other than you have one extra line wire to hook up. Instead of L1 and neutral and ground, you have an L1, L2 neutral and ground. So there's a little bit more complexity, but not enough that you have to be intimidated. You could build something like this doing a little research. So anyway, if you want to build your own and you can't find the information you're looking for, you can ask me and I'll give you the best advice I can to help you along so that you can figure out how to build one yourself if you want this. It's a big savings building my own as opposed to buying it. So anyway, I did want to mention that. I wanted to talk about building your own versus buying. And I do have a long way to go with this. I'm going to do a full-blown access to it as to how it looks and how I built it. I'll do all that in the near future, but I do want to make a couple of quick changes. I want to get the Victron Smart Shunt hooked up. I want to get these batteries. I got to rotate them. I put them facing up. I first put them facing out the back, and I thought that was dumb. So I turned around and I put them here. Now I'm going to move them one more time because of where this is now and the way it's set up. It's at a 22-degree angle, and you stand on that side of the cart to use this. So I might as well have the batteries facing that way too, and they'll give me this whole top that I can put a platform on and do some wiring on it. So I think it's an advantage to flip these 90 degrees and have them facing that way so that when you stand on that side, you work with the batteries and this from that side. And that'll be good enough for this unit, the way it works. But other than that, so once I get all of that done, I'm also thinking about making this thing a little bit less bulky. Since I got to put 4 posts on the corners, I may do something like that and attach this on the rail system on the 4 corner posts. But anyway, and maybe that can lighten it up, but more importantly, open it up more, because I really like to have this area underneath it more open for room for the wiring and that sort of thing. So once I get a little bit further along, I'm going to do a detailed one and show it to all of YouTube. They don't even know. There's only going to be a few of us that even have seen this thing at all, but I just want to let you know, it feels good to finally have that thing up and running, so let the power go out. I dare it now. So anyway, that's about it. I do have a quick story for you if you want. I was thinking about it yesterday. I think I'll just share it with you because it is kind of funny and it's kind of a learning thing. When I was younger, I had bought this. We were making pretty good money, and my wife at the time, who has since passed away, but at the time, we decided to buy this big house. It was there were 7 bedrooms in it, It was quite the nice place. Big, huge 2-acre yard and everything. Anyway, it had a 120-foot long 2-lane driveway all the way out to the road that was paved. And a small parking area where you could park 3 cars on spots and not block each other in or the regular garage to be able to pull the car in. So it was a big parking area and driveway. So when we first bought it, one of my first thoughts, it was in the fall, one of my first thoughts was, we're going to have to remove snow on this thing. Because, you know, they're in Illinois, in northern Illinois. Yeah, you're going to get some doozy snows. And we did. So anyway, I had 2 boys that were in their they were teenagers. And I had one that is, he's 4 years younger than, he's 8 years younger than the oldest. Anyway, so I went out and I bought like a half a dozen shovels, different kinds. And I put them all out, and when winter was going to start coming, looks like it was going to snow, I told them that we were just going to shovel it, and that we were all going to do it, everybody. All 3 boys, their mother, and myself. I said, the only one that could maybe not help would be your mother. No problem. So they ho-hummed and complained and didn't want to do it. And so we started off doing all of this. And I noticed that by the end of the first winter, they actually were kind of enthused to do it. When the next winter hit, they were listening to the weather. And they heard when it was going to be like a 5 or 6 inch snow overnight, they actually got up at midnight or at 2 in the morning, whenever it was. They went out there and shoveled it halfway through that time so they could do it real fast. Just the 2 older boys. They teamed up and got it done. And I didn't even have to help them do it. And then when we got up in the morning, it made their job of shoveling a lot easier. So they actually really started enthusiastically doing all of that. Stopped complaining about doing the shoveling like they did the first year, every time we had to do it. And it was really funny how that kind of molded out like that. So anyway, as we got older and they moved out, one more step. When we were doing that, especially in the first year, they would always complain, why don't you get a snowblower? When you get a snowblower to do this. And I said, no. I said, we're not shoveling snow out there, kids. We're building character. And that would just kind of shake their head and they'd walk away. They didn't want to argue about it anymore. So anyway, this went on for several years. And finally, the 2 older ones moved out, and it was only just myself and the youngest one there. And I decided it's time to get a snowblower. There is not enough manpower to do it. So I went out and I bought a snowblower at that point. And we started using a snowblower to do that. My 2 older kids just screamed and yelled at me one day. They're so funny. I mean, not mad. They're just trying to make me explain to us why we, you know, now you get a snowblower now that we don't live here anymore. That's not fair. You should still be shoveling. You know, Rod, the youngest one, he could do all the snow shoveling himself if he wanted to. It's not hard. Anyway, I thought that was funny. And I told him, I said, don't you remember? I told you. We weren't shoveling snow in those years. We were building character. And it just got them all quiet after that. That always seemed to shut them down every time I said that. But it was so funny to listen to all that. And then at the end of the day, I ended up buying the snow shovel after they left. And they just really didn't want, they thought maybe they didn't want me to forget that point. Till I told them that, hey, not just building character. So anyway, to this day, this still brings a smile to my face when I think about that story and about how I took those kids. And what's really funny is how they really turned around and started enthusiastically doing the snow removal together as a team to get that snow shoveled on that driveway, and took care of it without any issues and problems, no complaints for the rest of the time that they lived there before they moved out on their own. And then that's when I bought the snowblower. So it was so funny to think about that. Anyway, I kind of enjoyed that story. I thought about it. And now you look back and you think about, if you had kids, some of the things that you had to do to get them to do things. Because getting 2 teenage boys to shovel a driveway that's 120 feet long and a parking lot by hand, that was quite a challenge. And to see the reaction over time where they turned around and eventually they really enjoyed doing that together. So sometimes you can build character and you don't know it when you do some of these things. But participating with the kids, and I was out there shoveling snow with them every chance I could. They did get up at 2 in the morning a few times when I didn't go out and do it. I just let them do it. And they didn't seem to care that I didn't help on those times. So the only one they used to rag on about not helping was the youngest one, who was only like 12 years old. And the other two was like 17 and 20 or something. So anyway, they used to rag on him about that. So anyway, I could tell you a lot of stories about it, but I did want to mention that about the snow shoveling and building character, because to this day, that's what I always tell them when they, when we're talking about shoveling snow, say, no, we're not, you don't shovel snow, you just build character. So anyway, I want to thank you. If you stayed this long, my hat is off to you. Thank you. I enjoyed sharing that story with you. If you get stories like that you want to share, I love to hear them. You can do a recording of it, or you can just leave me a comment, but comment time sometimes is a little hard to leave this kind of story. But anyway, thanks for coming by. If you have any questions about this, about how I've been using it and how it works, I'm going to be doing a lot of testing after I get the other thing on, so stay tuned. There'll be updates on it. And now that I've got this going, I can now start thinking about some of the other projects I want to do, the small ones. So I want to build a box with a lamp that has a Ryobi battery in it, and it'll sit there in the house, and the only time it comes on will be when the power goes off. So it'll be like an emergency light. And anyway, it's based on a video from somebody else. I think it's time to get that thing done. I think it'll be a very handy light to have. So when the power goes off at night, at least you have a light to be able to get up and find your flashlight if you have to. So stay tuned. I think that's going to be my next project, because I get to do some woodworking in that too, build a box. So any questions or comments, just leave them below. I really enjoy reading them. Otherwise, thanks for coming by, and we'll see you guys again very soon.